مرمر زماني يا زماني مرمر ضاعت بلادي والقلوب تتحسر مرمر زماني يا زماني مرمر ضاعت بلادي والقلوب تتحسر شربت كأسا وأنت عشت بكاسي والقلب يخشى عند ذكر القدس والمسجد الأقصى منى للنفس ومهد عيسى والهلال الأحمر مرمر زماني يا زماني مرمر ضاعت بلادي والقلوب تتحسر أما رام الله فهي تدعو الضيف ميل عليها تنتعش بالصيف هواها منعش طيب للنفس ميتها حلوة مثل ماء الكوثر مرمر زماني يا زماني مرمر ضاعت بلادي والقلوب تتحسر قبل السبية لا تطيق العار أو رب سماتها جبال النار لما يعود لاجئ للدار قد الكنافة والسمن لمطر مرمر زماني يا زماني مرمر ضاعت بلادي والقلوب تتحسر حيفا يا حيفا كيف أنا ألقاك قضيت عمري والقلب يهواك يا ريت يا حيفا نرجعوا نلقاك نقعد عشتك والسمك يتبعتر مرمر زماني يا زماني مرمر ضاعت بلادي والقلوب تتحسر مرمر زماني يا زماني مرمر ضاعت بلادي والقلوب تتحسر.
Today we will be reading the first part of The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, written by Ilan Pape, one of Israel's historians who now teaches in the United Kingdom. First published in 2007, it has been reprinted 2008, 2010, and 2011. We will start with the preface, which begins with two quotes. The Red House, quote, "We are not mourning the farewell. We do not have the time nor the tears. We do not grasp the moment of farewell. Why, it is the farewell, and we are left with the tears." Unquote. Taha Muhammad Ali, 1988, a refugee from the village of Safuriya. Second quote, "I am for compulsory transfer. I do not see anything immoral in it." Unquote. David Ben-Gurion to the Jewish Agency Executive, June 1938.
As the world has been watching the terrible events unfolding in Palestine and in Gaza, I was reminded of an extraordinary book which I want to share with you today. This is the book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Ilan Pape. And I wanted just to share some words from this book. This book is so important and so timely that we understand the historical evidence marshaled in this book and the origins, the deep origins of the current conflict. So on the back cover of this book, we read this very brief summary. It says, "The 1948 Israeli War of Independence involved one of the largest forced migrations in modern history. Around 1 million people were expelled from their homes at gunpoint. Civilians were massacred and hundreds of Palestinian villages were destroyed. Denied for almost 6 decades, had it happened today, it could only have been called ethnic cleansing. In this groundbreaking book, renowned Israeli historian Ilan Pappé offers impressive archival evidence to demonstrate that, from its very inception, a central plank in Israel's founding ideology was the forcible removal of the indigenous population, a strategy that continues to the present day.
What we found in the archives is that from the mid-1930s, and definitely immediately after the Second World War, the Zionist political and military leadership contemplated and planned mass expulsion of Palestinians in order to create what they thought would be a Jewish democratic state. They wanted as much of Palestine as possible, with as few Palestinians in it as possible. Their main problem in 1947, 1948, when the British rule came to an end, was that the Jews in Palestine were only 1/3 of the population. And even when the United Nations took over the issue of Palestine from Britain and suggested to partition Palestine into an Arab state and a Jewish state in November 1947, the demographics were such that even in the Jewish state that was offered by the United Nations, the Jews were still not the majority, because there were too few Jews in Palestine in 47, 48. And the solution, definitely after the Second World War, in the eyes of the leading Zionist politicians and military commanders, was very clear. What I called in my book of 2007, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians.
I think it's worse than ethnic cleansing. This is ethnic cleansing which has turned into genocide. So from my perspective, what's happening now in Gaza is far worse than what happened in 1948.
Taking center stage today is Ilan Pappé. He's an Israeli historian and professor at the University of Exeter. Pappé is known for his outspoken views on the Israeli-Palestinian question, drawing both praise and criticism. He's the author of several books, including The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, in which he challenges the traditional Israeli narrative over the establishment of Israel in 1948.
Thank you for having me.
Before you left Israel to the UK in 2006, you were condemned in the Knesset. You were targeted. You were boycotted at the university that you worked at. I understand you also received death threats.
Joining me to discuss this from London, his theories and the controversy he's stirring, is Shlomo Sand, a professor of contemporary history at Tel Aviv University and author of the book The Invention of the Jewish People, which was on the bestseller list in Israel for several months and has recently been translated into English. Professor Sand also teaches at the University of California at Berkeley and the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales in Paris. Professor Sand, thanks very much for coming on the show. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Sir, I have to start off with a quote from your book where you say, "I could not have gone on living in Israel without writing this book. I don't think books can change the world, but when the world begins to change, it searches for different books." Considering what you've written in this book, you can't be very popular among many Israelis right now, and I wonder what difference you think you're going to make putting these views forward. What difference will it make to the situation in Israel?
As I said, I am not sure that books can change the world. But, with this conflict, without ending this conflict, I have a pessimist position. But I thought that it's very important to say something about myth that give birth of the Israeli state, and why this myth that helped to create Israel, this same myth can destroy Israel. You see, this ethnic myth. And this is a part of my book.
Well, Professor, you ask your readers to take a clear and unbiased look at Israel, to consider your views and the validity of your argument. And I wonder, considering the history and how loaded the history of Israel is and how entrenched people are in their views of how important Israel is to them, how can they look in an unbiased way? How can they step back from what they're so conditioned to think about?
But I think that as a historian, I have to put some truth in the narrative of the Israeli foundation. As I am writing in my book, it's very important to understand. You spoke before about the exile. You know, everybody in the street in Washington and London or in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv knows that the Jewish were expelled 2,000 years from Palestine or Judah, and they come back after 2,000 years. I think it was a myth, a legend. It's not a historical truth, and I try to prove it in my book. You see, it doesn't change the fact that Israel exists today, but all the justification, the historical justification of the Zionist colonization, I put on question.
Your book has been a bestseller for months in Israel. What has been the reaction of people? Though obviously there's many who will buy it out of curiosity, but what has been the reaction? Are there those who see you as a traitor, for example, to the Jewish cause?
Yeah. You see, the Israelis are not in the same view. A lot of young people in Tel Aviv bought the book. It's become a bestseller. A lot of journalists, by the way, in the TV programs invite me to every program and to discuss the book. It was a very large curiosity. There were also attacks, and not everybody. I arrived to an age to know that not everybody can love me. But I didn't try to be loved by everybody. But it's very interesting. You know, I don't think that Israel is real democracy in the sense that it's not a state of its citizens.
It's interesting you say at the beginning of the show, Professor, that the same myth that created Israel could also destroy it. Now, I want to quote from your book where you talk about how Israel may be isolated. You say, to what extent is Jewish Israeli society willing to discard the deeply embedded image of the chosen people and cease isolating itself in the name of a fanciful history or dubious biology and excluding the other from its midst? Now I wonder if your views on Jewish history do ever become so widely accepted that there is a majority accepting that kind of view, what difference do you think it will make in the way Israel moves forward? How do you think your views could change Israel's direction if they were accepted widely?
I think that Israel arrived to an age that it can be much more normal and much more democratic. In which sense? Because you see my position in the end of the book, not only because the historical analyze, but because of the future of the area. I think it's very important to understand that Israel has to become a society of its citizens, Jewish, Arabs. Then I think that we have to liberate ourselves from these ideas that we are a people race that come back after 2,000 years. I think it's a myth, as I said before, and I think that Israel has to stop to be a Jewish state and to become an Israeli state of its citizens, and that the Arab citizens in Israel will feel like a Jew is feeling in London or in Washington. This is one of my political dreams, that my little book will contribute to change the Israeli society. The Israeli state is a product of Zionist colonization. We have to admit it, you see. We came from other places, and we take the land of Palestine. But it's become a historical fact that now I want to change this state. I don't want to make it a state of all the citizens. And I think that the future of Israel in the Middle East depends on this changing of the characteristic of this state.
I have to put another email. Professor, well, it's okay. No, I have to put another email to you, which is an interesting one that came from Michigan here in the USA, from Linda Taylor, who wrote into our Facebook page saying, "Youth being youth, of course, don't hate each other. But if you are a young adult in Israel, you have to spend time in the military, where you learn real fast to dehumanize people." And I wonder, how have you noticed the reaction among young Israelis to your ideas and your research?
A lot of people don't like the ideas that I put forward, but there are a lot of other Israelis, not enough in my point of view, but they are not, against living with Arabs. I know, to speak about my students, I have a lot of students in Tel Aviv University that have quite different opinion of the government and of a lot of racists in Israel. I'm not sure to be optimistic because of it, but you have to understand that there are a lot of Israelians. There are Israelis that are not racist like other one. I want to live in Israel with Arab citizens, with the Palestinian state of its citizens. With these letters...
After this break, I want to quote your book again on an issue you've been talking about. We'll get back to discuss it when I get back. But in your book, when you talk about the ancient records of Jewish people, you say, the ancient Egyptians keep meticulous records of every event, and there is a great deal of documentation about the kingdom's political and military life. Yet there is not a single mention of any children of Israel who lived in Egypt or rebelled against it or emigrated from it at any time. I'm going to ask you about this fragility of the expulsion when we return. Stay tuned. More of our discussion when we're right back.
Israel's perception of itself is of a very decent, liberal, peace-loving country which was surrounded by predatory Arabs, and it had no choice but to stand up and defend itself. So this is a defensive war. And there is great reluctance to look at the dark side of this war, particularly at the ethnic cleansing that happened in 1948. The broader historical context for this film is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. In 1948, over 500 Arab villages were destroyed. 750,000 Palestinians were made refugees. Benny Morris counted 28 massacres, of which Tantura is only one. So it's not an isolated episode.
דיברתי עם אף אחד על זה. מה אני אספר לה שאני הייתי רוצח? כאן הם אמרו את הדברים. אתה יכול לקחת את הקלטות, אבל תיזהר, כי ירדפו אותך כמו שרדפו אותי. השתוללו בטנטורה על ים השונות.
אלה הקברי האחים של הכפר הזה. יש בית קברות שם, נעשה שם חנייה.
זה לא האופי שלנו.
אנחנו עם טהור.
Ethnic cleansing, which is what happened here, is exactly executed like that. There's no big program.
הייתה הוראה של בן גוריון לגרש את האנשים משם.
היינו צוציקים, בני 18, כבשנו טנטורה, תפסנו הרבה ערבים, אספנו אותם.
לקח פשוט מאוד ורצח אותם בתוך המכלאות.
כמה נהרגו? איזה 270-80 אני קברתי אותם.
بل صدفة أنا وقف من الطلاع كل حياة أبوي وأخوي
תעלה פתוחה, מה שאתה אומר? זאת תעלה פתוחה.
את זה אני לא שמעתי.
לאמת יש את הכוח שלה.
צריך פה לשנות את המחשבה, להכיר בעובדה הזו שהייתה פה נכבה.
המדינה נתנית השוואר.
כמובן שזה הרבה יותר קל להתעלם בכלל מכל העניין, ואז לא לכלכת את המצפון.
בטנטורה היה משהו נורא. טנטורה היה כפר עשיר, בתים יפים, גרים כמו אירופאים, אתה יודע, וגם אנשים היו לבושות ויפה, ובאמת היה כפר אחד, אנס שם איזה ילדה בת 16, משהו כזה, אתה מבין? אבל זה מכוער מאוד, היה לנו בחור אחד ונפטר, הוא היה פרא אדם, הוא לקח פשוט מאוד, ורצח אותם בתוך המכלאות. בתוך המכלאות, הם היו במכלאות, אתה יודע, חוטי ברזל כאלה, עגולים כאלה, אספו כל הגברים. הם יושבים שם, כל העם, על הרצפה, ובא מישהו ולוקח תת מקלע ומתחיל זה, מחליף מחסנית, מה אתה חושב זה? אבל אנחנו לא היינו כאלה. הוא היה יוצא דופן, הבחור הזה, כן, מה שהוא עשה. והשתיקו את הדבר הזה, והיו חבר'ה שלקחו את הלוויורים, ורדפו אחרי חבר'ה ושרפו אותם. זה היה משהו זוועתי, וזה אסור לספר, אני לא אדבר על זה, כי זה יכול להיות סקנדל שלם מהעניין הזה. אני לא רוצה לדבר על זה, וזהו.
3-4 חודשים הראשונים הייתי רוצח.
מה זה אומר?
אני לא לקחתי שבויים. בזמן קרב, אם מישהו ירים ידיים, משהו כזה, לא לקחתי שבויים. זה זעזע אותי עד כדי כך, לא יכלתי לעבור לסדר היום.
אם היה עומדת כיתה של זה עם ידיים למעלה, אז באותו יום הייתי רואה אותי, הייתי קוצר את כולם, עד כדי כך.
כמה אתה חושב אנשים הרגת ככה?
לא ספרתי. אני לא יכול לדעת בחיי. היה לי מקלע עם 250 כדורים. ותראה, יריתי, נלחמתי כולם. אני לא יכול לספור.
Most Israelis don't know their own history. Most Israelis don't know what really happened in 1948. Most Israelis believe the naive story that the Palestinians ran away in 1948 by themselves because they were told by their leaders to do so. And they don't understand that the Israeli army went into village after village and drove the people out, sometimes committing war crimes like the massacre in Tantura and others. My name is Alon Schwartz. I'm a filmmaker from Israel. I made the film Tantua, which is a film about the history of Israel, the untold part of our founding myth. Basically, it's a film about a Palestinian village that existed on the shoreline and was taken by the Israeli army 1 week after Israel was founded. It's known as the Tantura massacre. It was brought to light by a person by the name of Teddy Katz, an Israeli, who did his thesis on this in the University of Haifa, but then he was sued by the soldiers of that unit. It's called the Alexandroni Brigade, and basically they forced him to write an apology letter, and then he was thrown out of the university, and he was considered a liar and a person that made this up in Israel. 23 years later, I got his tapes, I got access to his audio recordings, I listened to them. He recorded both soldiers, Israeli soldiers in Hebrew and Arabic, villagers who used to live in the village. And basically, the story of the film is the story of what happened in 1948 in Tantura, what happened with Teddy Katz while investigating this story.